Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, taking a deep dive into this Oklahoma Sooners program, talking about two things. One, a little recap of what we saw from Oklahoma in the Alamo Bowl against Arizona. And then more importantly, if you're an Oklahoma fan, this is where your mind has to go now. Where do we need to get better heading into 2024? Talking about some transfer portal targets that we think Oklahoma should be going after. My overarching take on the bowl game, and we'll kind of dig into this, evaluate Jackson Arnold's performance, evaluate some other position groups, is this is an Oklahoma team that should have won that game. And I get that's frustrating for a lot of Oklahoma fans to hear, but you look at the numbers. I mean, 562 yards to Arizona's 381. 7 yards per play to Arizona, 6 yards per play. You ran the ball for 200 yards. They ran the ball for 29 yards. Oklahoma, without 6 turnovers, obviously is winning this football game. Want to get into Jackson Arnold, talk a little bit about what we saw from this team, and then what we think needs to get better heading into 2024. Before we get into it, just want to say thank you to you guys and to the Oklahoma fans. This has been a program that the boys love talking about, but more importantly, the amount of support the Oklahoma fans consistently show, it means a lot. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. More importantly, would love to hear from you guys in the comment section, takeaways from the game. And we watched the film, waited 24 hours to kind of give you guys our best thoughts on it. And then where would you like to see Oklahoma go in the transfer portal? Dill, I want to start with Jackson Arnold here and would love to hear what you saw from Jackson Arnold against Arizona.
I think what you essentially saw is why Jackson Arnold probably didn't start this year as a true freshman, but also probably why Dylan Gabriel probably needs to find a new place to play. Because at the end of the day, you saw those flashes, the athleticism, I think at quite a bit higher level, the arm talent, obviously at a higher level. And frankly, that will open up, I think, a lot of things for Oklahoma. And not only just like being able to throw the deep ball and those sort of like obvious things people notice, but being able to get the ball out quicker and get the ball into guys' hands quicker. You saw some of those quick slants where they were able to make some plays after the catch. You just like when you're throwing the ball at a really high velocity, you give your guys a chance. And you see the young guys are recruiting, guys like Jaquez Petaway. They need the ball in their hands fast. They need to be able to go make plays. And I think Jackson Arnold's arm talent gives you a better opportunity to kind of run your offense that way.
Let's make no mistake about it. The ceiling for this Oklahoma offense is significantly higher with Jackson Arnold than it is Dylan Gabriel. Like you watch how Jackson Arnold operates this offense. There were throws that you really couldn't ask Dylan Gabriel to make because he didn't have the arm power to do so. Like when you're trying to throw to the opposite boundary, like that, Dylan Gabriel did not have the juice in his arm to make those kind of throws. Dylan Gabriel is an awesome quarterback, and there was a reason why Oklahoma had a lot of success with him, and he's going to have a lot of success at Oregon as well. But Jackson Arnold offers a higher ceiling in terms of making some of those throws, getting the football quickly to the playmakers in space. This is what I thought about it. I saw very similar in my head, I saw a very similar conversation around J.J. McCarthy and Cade McNamara from a couple of years ago, right? Cade McNamara was a very high floor player for Michigan, while J.J. McCarthy was a true freshman. But when you saw J.J. McCarthy take over the reins, yes, there were some growing pains. With a young quarterback that's trying to adjust to the college football level, the offense looks different with a guy like Jackson Arnold in this offense that it did with Dylan Gabriel. And if you're an Oklahoma fan, I get the turnovers were frustrating, but I mean, this is a guy that offers a much higher ceiling for this Oklahoma offense heading into 2024. There's no doubt in my mind about it.
Yeah, and frankly, there was a lot of things around him that I don't think were going particularly well, and that starts with the offensive line, a unit that really had to kind of overhaul itself in 1 week, if you will, or just in between their last regular season and the bowl practice. They had to make a lot of changes, obviously, so I mean, it didn't look like physically they were getting beat up, but not picking up blitzes, not picking up stunts. Some of those communication things were clearly off. And again, that's just a unit probably as we get into what they need to probably look for in the portal. I think everyone kind of knows that you probably got to add a couple guys, but I think that certainly did him no favors. You kind of saw some skittishness rolling out of the pocket in kind of odd ways, maybe not tucking the ball down and running. So you saw those freshman things. I don't think the offensive line was giving a ton of help. And frankly, I don't think the wide receivers were helping him a ton either.
The one thing that you want to see cleaned up for Jackson, obviously a few decisions early that were not great. I will know one positive, like battling back, like after those 2 picks, like this was an offense that was absolutely cooking. And if Jalil Farouk doesn't drop that football, Oklahoma wins that game, and the narrative around Oklahoma heading into 2024 is a lot different according to Oklahoma fans than it is right now. I mean, that was a one play that was massive in this game that kind of changed, in my opinion, possibly the outcome of the game. Now, you look at one thing Jackson Arnold does need to clean up. It's right in my notes here, the pocket presence, right? I mean, it's like breaking pockets, and that Oklahoma offensive line didn't inspire a ton of confidence for a young freshman to sit there in the pocket. And you saw him do it a couple times, but there were some times where it's like, hey, you got to hang in there, deliver a football accurately, and he kind of broke the pocket. That gets better. I mean, J.J. McCarthy, again, he struggled with that too in his first year of college football. You're going to see that get better. That gets better with more reps, more in-game reps. I'm really excited about Jackson Arnold. One other note I have on offense, Gavin Sawchuk is going to be an absolute dude in 2024. Like when you saw him, and I think he was banged up in the second half, but the juice that he had in the first half, I mean, that's just different. And if you get this offensive line right, the run game is going to be extremely good for Oklahoma. Now, I do want to talk about the offensive line because I do think they probably got to add some names in the portal.
Yeah, and that I think we knew that coming into this bowl game. This bowl game probably just more or less confirmed it. But I also think there is that level of when you do have to shuffle the decks really abruptly, you do get some of that. And you kind of look. You see a lot of talent from Sexton. I think he's going to be a very good player. I know they really like Jake Taylor kind of coming in, and whether he plays guard or tackle next year, he'll probably be a big part of that. And Everett, I thought, played pretty decent too physically. I think you saw some issues again, picking up stunts and maybe being in control of that offense as at that center position. But I think physically it looks like it should be okay. I think, again, needs some development, needs some competition. But I think you like the bones which you have. And one thing you're excited for is you're starting to get a group of fully Venables guys, if you will. They're all going to be kind of guys.
I'd probably push back on like you like the bones of what you have. Like you need to add. So you have two already in the class, and we'll talk about those guys. You got to get some more competition. I think you need a little bit more talent. I like some of the guys that are coming in, but you got to get deeper. And again, it's only going to get harder in the SEC. Like that's an Arizona defensive line that was good. You're going to see a lot of those kind of offensive or defensive lines in the SEC. And I guess my final take, and we'll move to the defense, is if you are Oklahoma and you're going into the offseason, your number one goal is to make sure Jackson Arnold has all the tools that he needs to be successful. Because if he has the tools, I think he's going to thrive in this Oklahoma offense. You got to give him a run game. You got to give him some protection. And if you do that, you're going to see Jackson Arnold put up some numbers in 2024. But you got to make sure that offensive line is right. Now, Dill, going to the defense, very rough first quarter. But after that, I mean, that Oklahoma defense was kind of dominant for the last couple of quarters of that game. I mean, if you take away those turnovers and some of the bad spots they were put in, I mean, Arizona was not moving the ball. They couldn't run the football. They couldn't pass protect the quarterback. If you're an Oklahoma fan, that's kind of how you want that Brent Venables defense in that front seven looking, because they were after Arizona all night up front.
And that's kind of what it was like to me. It's like you hadn't maybe seen Oklahoma's defensive line play that game where
you saw like flashes of it early in the season, and then it kind of went away. We've talked about it plenty of times throughout the season. That performance from Oklahoma, at least in the front seven, is how you want this Brent Venables defense to look. And if you're an Oklahoma fan looking to 2024, you're excited about some of the young guys like an R. Mason Thomas stepping up in a massive way.
Yeah, and that was the big thing for me is you saw him, Atabara, I thought played really, really good. And frankly, you got a bunch of really good guys coming in this 24 class. Yes. So you're starting to see them build the talent, like the high-end talent, not just like the transfer, like bridge talent, that like solid players, nothing to take away from them, but not dominant, not going to go first round. I think you're starting to see that. I think R. Mason Thomas looked awesome. Atabara, you're starting to see why he's that 5-star recruit. And that's kind of what, again, if Venables is going to have really good defense at Oklahoma, like he did at Clemson, it's going to be dominant defensive lines and allowing him to play hyper aggressive, take the football away, and create a lot of negative plays. So that you're starting to see that formation come together, I think.
And I think another thing that I noted is you saw why having a dominant front seven is so massive, because that secondary struggled. It struggled to match up with some of those wide receivers who are really good. One thing I noticed, and talking about going into next year and do you need to add anyone in the back end? I don't think you need to add any talent in the back end. I'm high, a guy like Gentry Williams, obviously high on Peyton Bowen. You have Billy Bowman coming back. You have a guy like Makari Vickers, who I think is going to be very good for Oklahoma next year. My take on it is you got to get better in that zone coverage. Like the middle of the field was way too easy to attack for Arizona. And that didn't have to do with you don't have the guys physically capable of doing the job. It has to do more with getting more disciplined, with dropping back in your spots, right? I mean, you saw Kip Lewis fly out to the flat and the middle of the field was kind of just completely vacated plenty of times. Now, the thing you'll note is once that Oklahoma defensive line got cooking, it doesn't matter. Like if you have a front seven that can get after the quarterback, going back to Georgia in 2021, Georgia's secondary was not great in 2021. It didn't matter because the pass rush was too good for Georgia. And if you're Oklahoma, it starts up front. And if you do have some maybe things you're working through in the back end, those things that you're working through kind of get covered up because that Oklahoma front seven is not giving Noah Fifita or another quarterback any time to throw and operate from the pocket.
And frankly, with that secondary, I think you're still looking like that's still coming together. You saw a lot of new players playing. I mean, Dolby played a lot, Spears Jennings played a lot, and they had their moments for sure. But you also saw, like, again, what you kind of like two guys in the same zone, two guys fly out to the flat, leave the middle wide open. You saw that far too often, I think. And that's not like a physical issue. That's not saying, oh, we just don't have guys who can run with wide receivers or can't match up physically. It was just a lot of, like, again, what you kind of mentioned, really poor kind of mental mistakes. And that to me, it's like, again, you look at that number on the pass yards for what Arizona did. That doesn't, I don't think that says that, oh, we need to go hammer this portal class in the secondary. Because again, I think it's really, really, like, you just see enough guys who are very talented that I think it should be fine. But that's probably going to be a lot more on coaching and being able to develop that and play a better scheme, because it wasn't a physical issue at all.
And it's worth noting that Arizona passing attack is one of the best in the country coming into this. Like, that's not an easy, like, Noah Fifita is a dude. T-Mac is going to be a top 20 pick in the NFL draft in 2025. Like, there are some really good players on that offense that Oklahoma, I thought, for the last 3 quarters really battled against. And so I look at the defense and saying, yeah, you probably want to add, and we'll talk about this. Well, I guess it's a perfect segue to get into it. You look at Oklahoma's transfer portal class right now, and they've taken 6 guys. And I think you're not going to see a 25-plus class for Oklahoma because that's not how they want to do things. They want to get guys in the program from high school, develop them up. But there are certain spots where you do want to add in the transfer portal. And the first position we talked about was offensive line. This is the name, if I'm an Oklahoma fan, that I am continuing to refresh Twitter to see if his name hits the portal. And that's Lance Hurd from LSU. He's a true freshman this year, appeared in all 12 games for LSU. The reason why he might be hitting the portal is not because he can't play, is because he wants to play tackle. And you look at LSU, they got 2 NFL tackles that are coming back next year. Lance Hurd, I think, is, for one, I think he's better than Caden Green. And 2, I think would be a massive get for Oklahoma. And you look at him coming out of high school as LSU and Nebraska. He's a Louisiana guy. He was a lock to go to LSU pretty much throughout the whole process. When he opens up, I don't think there's a school that he wants to just go to. And if you're Oklahoma and he hits the portal, you are pouncing on him. He's not going to play in the LSU bowl game. Lance Hurd would be huge for Oklahoma to add in the sport.
And what Oklahoma can clearly offer is opportunity to compete for starting jobs at pretty much any position. Because again, you really don't have this line situated as to say, okay, we're missing this piece. Like, you're kind of still shuffling it around and seeing what are going to be our best 5, whether it's Sexton at guard, whether it's Taylor at guard, whether either of those guys play tackle. However it shakes out, I think all the positions are open, and that's the one thing LSU cannot offer Lance Hurd, because you're right. They have 2 NFL tackles. No other college teams really have that. So Oklahoma can offer him that. I think he can come in and play early, play the position he wants if he's as good as kind of that high school recruiting says.
Oh, but the thing with him is I've watched it. Like, this dude is good. Like, this ain't a thing of like, oh, you just weren't good enough as a true freshman to play. We'll see if you're ready year 2. He was ready. He was just behind 2 really, really good tackles at LSU. And I think you made a really good point. There are not a lot of top programs that offer, like, hey, you come in and you're probably going to start a tackle for us. And we're not handing out starting spots like it's candy, but you're talented enough to do so. We have a massive vacancy all along this offensive line. And then more importantly, like Bill B, he's a proven developer. He just puts guys out into the NFL. These guys want to go to the NFL. I think this would be a perfect landing spot for Lance Hurd to wind up in Oklahoma. Road grader in the run game, can get it done in pass pro. Obviously, a former 5-star would be a massive get. The next guy I'm taking a look at here is Quantavious Leslie, and probably one of my favorite offensive linemen available in the portal. And let's be frank about it. There aren't a ton of guys that come in and start at Power 5 schools that are left in the portal on the offensive line. I think Quantavious Leslie, probably a plug-and-play guy on that inside. 6'3", 318 pounds. Out of 513 pass pro snaps at Western Kentucky in 2023, only gave up 10 pressures. Elite in pass protection. But again, what I think he brings is just a road grader. And Dale, this was one of the things that you noted earlier. Oklahoma was solid up front. I don't think they were dominant up front. And you look at what Brent Venables wants to be. We want to be a dominant team along the line of scrimmage. We want to win the point of attack, reset the line. I think Quantavious Leslie can do that for Oklahoma.
Yeah, that's a big thing to me. And a lot of that, frankly, I think will be internal development at some level. But I think you're right to add some competition and some guys who you kind of are used to pushing people around a little bit and we're used to imposing their will. Because that was the one, I think, disappointing thing, I think, from Oklahoma is even like some talented players last year, they weren't bullying teams around that much. And I think, again, you talk about what Brent Venables is trying to build as they head into the SEC. It wants toughness. It wants toughness on the defensive line. That looks like it's pretty much there now. The offensive line, I think, still is coming along and kind of being the unit I think he wants it to be in what I think, frankly, it should be as they head into the new conference.
Now, you talk about one other position that, and again, this goes back to you look at this Oklahoma roster and projected into 2024. This is not a team that's like, oh, we need to get 25 guys like that. This is a really good roster. It has a ton of young talent. If there's one other position that I'm saying, all right, we maybe want to add another body, it is on that defensive line. And it's not necessarily because I think the defensive line's bad. It's more, what does Brent Venables want to do? He wants to have a deep group and he wants to have a talented group. And Nick Skirton, a top 10 player available in the portal, I think represents a massive ability to make this defensive line a dominant group and kind of continue that dominance in 2024. You're talking about a guy that led the Big Ten in sacks at 10.5 sacks, 15 tackles for a loss, 28 run stops, a pass rush win rate of 20.9%, all against really good offensive lines in the Big Ten. He reminds me of Rondell Bothroyd, just better, like a heavy-handed guy that can play all over the defensive line. You talk about losing some depth and some veteran pieces up front. I think Nick Skirton comes in and kind of fills what you're looking for if you're Oklahoma on that defensive line.
And what I think is the biggest thing is he complements, I think, what the two guys they have coming back that I really, assuming if Downs comes back, he's obviously kind of the guy on that defensive line. But Adebawore and R. Mason Thomas are the two guys who flashed and
they're dogs.
Looking like, well, these two are going to be a crucial part of what they do next year. I think he complements what they do really, really well because he probably adds a little more versatility in terms of his ability to play against the run and be that all down and play a couple different positions, which again, you kind of look for nowadays. That's like important when teams want to be able to spread you out or pack you in. It's like you don't see that. I think you want versatility, and I think he ultimately gives you that in a way that complements what they have coming back from those two guys we just mentioned.
Totally agree. He's the guy that I'm taking a look at. And if you're Oklahoma, you're adding not a lot of bodies, you're adding quality bodies. I think Nick Skirton, I think Lance Hurd, I think Quantavious Leslie would be those kind of guys. We'll continue to update Oklahoma in the roster moves in the transfer portal. I think Brent Venables knows what he needs to do. I think now it's about executing it on the recruiting trail. Appreciate the Sooner fans rocking with the boys again. This has been a program we love talking about. The amount of support you guys show has been awesome. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.